professional wrestling legend. He's been a booker. He's been a manager. He's wrestled a little bit, too. He also knows how to use a tennis racket pretty damn well. He is the man they call James E. Cornette. Mr. Cornette, how are you today, sir?
Fred, I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Now, a lot of listeners may not know this, but I was lucky enough to be cast as Vince Russo for your Ring Roast DVD a few years back, where I actually had a bucket list moment and you took me out via tennis racket shot. Do you have any memories of that moment?
Well, actually, no, I've slept since then, but no, I do remember it. I blame Zeb Colter for the whole incident. That dirty Dutch Mantell. He was the instigator and the go-between in arranging you to be the sacrificial Russo for the conclusion of the roast. So I hope you recovered sufficiently. I understand you spent about 6 months in a wheelchair.
I did. It was rough, but I'd say it was well worth it. I asked Dutch, I was like, what do I say to Jim? He goes, just do your Russo impression. I was like, all right. So I came out on stage and I was like, I invented Lou Thez, Steve Austin, The Rock, Billy Kidman. You didn't invent anybody, you son of a bitch. And Jim's getting all angry.
You invented air and water.
And water, you know?
And then I hit you so hard. Andy Kaufman didn't wear the neck brace that long after Lawler pile drove him. Then you were incapacitated and hooked up to tubes in your various orifices.
Yeah, and I was dragged out like a sack of potatoes. It was a rough night, man. But I learned the hard way.
A tough night. You know, it was a real tough crowd.
Yeah, it was a tough crowd, bro. They're from New York. It was New Jersey, okay? They don't understand it, even though I live in Denver right now, you know? Vince Russo, bro. Hashtag it. Oh, man. Well, we'll probably cover a little bit of Russo, but on a more positive note, you've been doing a whole lot these last few months, my friend. UK tour, podcasting, Jim Cornette in the 21st century, all over the place. I look online, you're doing an interview, you're hosting a show, you're doing a podcast, you're on the stage. Can you tell fans what you've been up to the last few months?
Well, you didn't leave me anything to talk about. You covered everything. No, I ribbed myself, actually. My schedule the past couple of months has been ambitious, to say the least. We did do the Corny in the UK tour in February. We were over there actually a total of almost 3 weeks between the time we left home, time we got back. We did some sightseeing also, but we did the Jim Cornette Experience live in London at the Leicester Square Theatre, and in Manchester, Birmingham, Cardiff, Wales, Glasgow, Scotland. A bunch of great guys over there put the tour together. Hosted an episode and appeared on another episode of Wrestle Talk TV on Challenge while I was over there. They were taped and just aired to critical acclaim. I'm so proud of. We got back and immediately we were at the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention over at Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky in March, where we met a bunch of fans, did a book signing, merchandise sales. I have a burger named after me, by the way, at Huge Ass. That's Hughjjas Burgers in Lexington. My friend Mitch Colley over there, they sold out of them over the weekend because everybody was coming from the Comic-Con to get the Cornette's Racket Burger. So go in and purchase that, if you will, folks. Then the following week, I was an emergency replacement at Cape Con in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, at the comic convention there for Jerry Lawler, who couldn't make it, and got to do not only my booth, meet a bunch of the fans, a bunch of the people listening to the Jim Cornette Experience on my podcast, but also did the show live there that night at the Cup and Cork, which was a wonderful location. And I'm fixing to go to New Orleans for a week, one day of which will be spent at the Mid-South Wrestling Legends Fan Fest on April 4th at the Seeger Center in Chalmette with the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, Bill Watts, Bill Dundee, the Fantastics. The following weekend, are you with me still, Fred?
I'm with you. It's a hell of a schedule so far.
The following weekend, I'm going to be the special guest general manager at Dreamwave Wrestling on Saturday, April 12th, and do a meet and greet and a book signing there. On April 13th, I will be at the Squared Circle Restaurant in Chicago, owned by Victoria Lisa Marie of the WWE, and I will be appearing with Svengoolie to eat the scariest burger in Chicagoland, the Svengoolie burger, there at the Squared Circle. There'll be cameras there from MeTV for Svengoolie's nationally syndicated horror movie program on Saturday nights to document that occasion. And then I'll be at Star City WrestleFest on April 26th in Salem, Virginia at the Civic Center signing books. And in May, June, and July, chances are I'll probably take time off and not leave the house because I'm supposed to be writing some books. And this is in addition to my Jim Cornette Experience podcast that airs every week on MLW.com, or you can go to JimCornette.com and click on the podcast button to link to that, or Click on events and appearances for a complete lineup of what I've told you about. So it's one-stop shopping, JimCornette.com. And in my spare time, I'm donating my time to a halfway house for girls who won't go all the way.
Wow, hell of a schedule, my friend. That's you're keeping yourself quite busy.
I'm too old for this. I'm going to retire again soon.
And you actually did recently part ways last year with Ring of Honor Wrestling. Has this been the longest you've been not involved with just one particular promotion?
It's been the longest I've not been involved in wrestling. It's been wonderful. With the exception of the Wrestling Legends Fan Fests and get-togethers of that type that I truly enjoy and always try to make. I have not done a wrestling event for a year and a half. Now, I am doing the Dreamwave job because those guys, it's their 5th anniversary, and they've been very nice to me. But I look at that as primarily a book signing and meet and greet, and then I will make some rulings based on my recommendations. Whether or not they're followed is not up to me to physically uphold.
Now, WrestleMania, right around the corner. I know you don't watch much of the product these days, because, and admittedly, especially for somebody like you that actually knows what you're doing, it can be hard.
Yeah, I'm overqualified, right? I'm overqualified.
Yes, if you try to watch wrestling sometimes with too much logic, it does hurt your brain. TNA Impact. But anyway, WrestleMania is right around the corner. You were not only involved in WrestleMania as a talent in the past, but you were in creative or booking, for lack of a better term, with WWE for a number of years as well. Around this time, are there any fond memories of WrestleMania that come to mind?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've told this story before in different places, but it's amazing that the first time that I ever walked into Madison Square Garden in my life, I walked in to manage the WWF champion in the main event at WrestleMania 10. And it was just a series of events which you can read about if you go to my website, JimCornette.com, that led me there. But that was cool. And not only that, but I actually managed the champion twice because, of course, there was the match with Lex Luger with Curt Hennig as special referee, and Yokozuna retained over Luger after he gave me a very questionable-looking punch that I was ready to fly for. And then Yoko lost the title to Bret Hart later that night, and Roddy Piper knocked me out. So I got knocked out by Roddy Piper in Madison Square Garden in the main event of WrestleMania 10, my first time in the building. So that's cool. My probably greatest memory of WrestleMania is just because it's so outlandish that I actually wrestled at. Jerry Lawler has never wrestled at WrestleMania. Guess who has?
Actually, he did wrestle a few years ago, but that was such a terrible match with Michael Cole that
I forgot that
we'll pretend that one didn't exist. So
it took him till he was 62. I forgot they did it, but it took him till he was like 62 to do it. But I wrestled at WrestleMania, the Gimmick Battle Royal in Houston, on WrestleMania 17, and that was the biggest money grossing pro wrestling event up to that time, to see the main event of Steve Austin and The Rock. And here's how hard it was to get booked on the undercard of the biggest money pro wrestling event up to that point in time of all time. I'm on the phone with Bruce Pritchard because we were scheduled to come down for meetings with the talent relations people about the developmental program. Danny Davis and I were going down from Louisville. And he says, well, I'm in this Gimmick Battle Royal. They're bringing all the old-timers back in the apparel that they wore and persona that they had when they were in the WWF, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm in it as Brother Love. And I jokingly said, well, you ought to put me in it, and I'll get in the corner and beat you up so we'll stay safe, and none of those old-time assholes will, potato us, right? Yeah. He says, you want to be in it? I said, is it extra fucking payoff? He said, yes. I said, okay. That's how hard it was for me to get booked to wrestle on WrestleMania. And once again, how outlandish is that when people aspire and dream their entire lives and never get to WrestleMania, and I got it by being an asshole and a smart ass. So those are probably my two favorite memories.
That's awesome. Now, you also were a part of OVW for a number of years when it was a developmental territory for WWE. And while it's nice to see WWE put millions of dollars into the Performance Center and WWE NXT and finally realize, hey, let's invest in the future. Maybe that's a good idea. Does it kind of piss you off that they didn't do this, say, 10, 15 years ago when, they had a lot more veterans and talent to work with?
When they were putting about $75,000 a year in developmental. Obviously, but at the same time, see, that was the bone of contention that led to me leaving that situation to begin with, is the WWF or E did not own Ohio Valley Wrestling. It was our promotion, our training facility, and our television production that we had, and we contracted with Jim Ross to provide a developmental program for the WWF to give guys experience on television, working live events, in-school training, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, we would have liked them to have spent more money for that privilege, but we never actually wanted them to buy our company because we wanted to do our own thing. And ultimately, they wanted to exert all the influence over us and not let us do our own thing, but at the same time not pay us enough money for us to just ball everything else we wanted to do up and say, fuck it. So now they have that place, and it's great they have that place in a state-of-the-art facility, but nothing can replace doing television. And I know they've got NXT, but they put it on the internet, doing television for a local group of people on broadcast television, running live events around the area with guys that they see on their local television, building a pecking order, teaching guys how to be stars, teach guys how to be opening match guys, teaching them how to be middle card guys, and moving them up through the system. That is what I think OVW did well, and that is what they should concentrate on, in my opinion, with their training center.
I totally agree with you there. Do you feel like TNA totally missed an opportunity when they were working with OVW? It feels like that relationship started. They did the gut check thing. I don't know how much you caught of that. It was pretty forgettable.
Thankfully, they threw it at me, but I didn't catch it.
All right. Well, they did the gut check thing, and then all of a sudden, after all these budget cuts and everything, we cut ties with OVW.
Well, I know what the gut check principle was, and I understand that, even though I was not watching with bated breath. But for one thing, a lot of TNA's talent that they had on Impact every week still needs some good training. And secondly, they did not have the money, the resources, or the commitment to put same into actually having a great developmental program. They had some talent in Louisville training on their off days from TNA, but it was a limited involvement, as I understand it, and it was not a full-fledged developmental system commitment to begin with because they were still trying to finance keeping their main program afloat.
Now, I asked a number of fans, I said, hey, Jim Cornette's going to be on the Sports Courier. Do you have any questions for him? We got an overwhelming number of questions. Do you have some time to take a few?
Both of them. You got both of them this time.
Yeah. Do you have some time to take a few questions, sir?
Oh, sure.
All right. Well, actually, this is not a question. This is a comment here from Antonio the Promise Thomas of the Heartbreakers, the Heartthrobs. Tell Jimmy I said I love him.
I love him, too, and in a purely platonic and manly way. But, yes, the Heartbreakers, they were only the Heartthrobs when they sucked in the WWE. The Heartbreakers were one of my favorite teams in Ohio Valley Wrestling. Promise and oh, my God, I'm going completely blank.
Romeo.
His partner, Romeo Roselli, thankfully, who has since moved on to acting and modeling from wrestling, and thank goodness for him because it's probably easier to get a job and they pay better.
Yeah, and he gets benefits.
And you get benefits.
Definitely. All right, this person here asks, who came up with the idea of having your infamous tennis racket?
I did. I was going to Louisiana to start managing the Midnight Express, and I saw one of the teen movies popular in the 80s where the rich kid in the group carried a badminton racket around in every scene. And I thought, well, managers have carried umbrellas, canes, suitcases, briefcases, etc., but nobody's ever carried a tennis racket, and it will give me a couple of feet reach on the fans who are very violent in the Louisiana territory, and it worked for both purposes.
Okay, this question right here from Jay George. I heard on Jim Ross's podcast that NXT trainers should have a goal of creating 3 to 4 main eventers per year. Do you agree with that?
If they could do that, that'd be great. Yeah. Because I don't know that you can really do that because, look, the work you have to put into training a main event talent and the spots available for main event talents, and the number of guys that do get over as true main event talents ain't that big. So yeah, if they do 3 or 4, they're as Nick Goulas used to say, farting through silk.
Okay, Paul Schofield asks, is Jim actually any good at tennis?
No. I've actually never played a competitive game, only practicing for my craft of swinging at people's balls, not balls being hit by people.
Emerson Whitner asks, and this is a serious question. Well, I'm assuming it's a serious question. It's a real question. If Vince Russo was on fire, would you piss on him even though you may put out the fire?
I think I would have to, only if I was sure that the last vestiges of life had left his burning body, and then I would want to put it out so that I could take some Polaroid photos.
You've had the opportunity to work with some of the best wrestlers in the world. Who would you say was the easiest to work with, and who would you say is the most difficult?
Oh, God. There were a lot of different people, or a lot of difficult people, I should say, as in, Shawn Michaels level difficult in his days. There were also easy guys. You can talk about Eddie Edwards in Ring of Honor as a guy who you explain to him what you'd like. He says yes, he goes out, he does it to the best of his ability, he adds a bunch of his shit, he's never a complaint, happy guy, wonderful to work with. But there's a bunch of those guys. If I start naming people, then I will leave a bunch of them out. And, in his day, Bobby Eaton was one of the easy. Bobby, go be great. Boom, done. Have time for a sandwich now. So, but I don't want to single anyone out because also I haven't had time to research it. And if I leave out a real prick, I'd be upset later.
Did you hear about the former ROH champion Kevin Steen doing a tryout for WWE?
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to see that, yes.
Apparently he got himself in pretty good shape, and I guess I'm just curious on your thoughts on his WWE prospects. I mean, of course, Eddie Edwards, Davey Richards, they apparently had a great camp. They even got a tryout match and a trial in NXT for a couple weeks, but unfortunately weren't signed. What do you think about his WWE chances when his diet is right?
You back and forth from Steen to the Wolves. First of all, the Wolves... like I said, I'm a big Eddie Edwards fan. I don't know if Davey said anything that worked against him during his tenure there, but he seems to do that for a habit. With Steen, a great idea, lose weight and get in shape. I wish I'd have thought of that 4 years ago. Oh, wait, I did. I haven't seen him, but if he has lost weight and gotten in shape, although the last time that I saw him, if he's lost weight and gotten in shape until now, he's hired Richard Simmons as his personal trainer. But I have no knowledge of how he did and hope he does well because in that relationship, one of those folks, either the WWE or Kevin Steen, would probably be driven completely insane.
Justin here asks, were you surprised that WWE never called up Chris Hero to the main roster, let alone brought him on for dark matches or house shows to help young guys work?
Am I surprised? No. Do I think it's ridiculous? Yes. That's two different questions. I was a big fan of Chris's when he was in the Kings of Wrestling. I thought he and Claudio were the modern-day Midnight Express, the best heel tag team in wrestling of any company, just with, what they could do, the way that they presented themselves, et cetera, and I was sad when they signed developmental deals because as a fan, I was happy for them. They might make some money. I was sad for them as a wrestling fan that I wouldn't get to see more of those Kings of Wrestling matches. And I always thought that Claudio had the inside track because, of course, obviously he's got the look that they like, and I thought it would be an uphill struggle for Chris because while he actually helped train Claudio along with a bunch of other guys over his years, he has so much experience, but he doesn't look like what they look for traditionally, and it would be a more uphill climb. But I'm just... I don't know why you would take a guy like that's got that much experience but still with it on the modern scene and can relate to the young guys and say, hey, you're our fucking head trainer for the guys that come in from independence to try to teach them the ways of the world. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Right. It's not my week to watch them.
All right, this is an interesting question from Anthony right here. Obviously, you know John Cena quite well. He's had an amazing career. Do you think he is at the stage now where he should be helping WWE make new guys for the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you can always be in a position where at the right time you help make a new guy for the future, but that depends on whether they ask you to or want you to. I don't think that John would ever have a problem doing that, especially with somebody he believed in, but I don't know that they're ready to ask him yet. And I mean, part of it is, do we think the guy is ready to jump that bridge from kind of main event guy to top level superstar and beat one of the few faces of the company, or the face, depending on the situation? So, I'm always in favor of making new guys and getting new guys over, because people always want new talent. But sometimes, if it's not the right situation, you try to make a new guy and you just end up hurting the guy you had, but you don't make the new guy.
So you're saying it should also kind of be organic too. Like, you don't just want to make a new guy for the sake of.
Well, yeah, you don't just say, "Hey, I bet Joe's going to be good. Let's put him over Cena. That'll get him over." That's not what gets him over. That's what you got to get a guy over first, and then that's what gets him to stay over. Is enough wins over guys like that. You can get over just by beating the rank and file members of the roster and doing some entertaining shit. But you don't get over and stay over as an icon, a legend, a money guy, unless the right opportunity presents it, a la Mick Foley bringing Triple H along in what was 2001, whatever the case. You see where I'm going with this?
Yes, I see. And, well, besides yourself, another guy who knows how to get talent over is our mutual friend Dutch Mantell, who is the first cousin, the very close cousin of Zeb Colter. Dutch Mantell.
If that is indeed his real name.
If that is his real name. And Dutch Mantell was in TNA for a long time, along with you. And I'm just wondering, did anyone ever think, hey, wait a minute, we should have this guy manage one of our wrestlers? Because I find it hard to believe that he was in TNA for almost a decade. He leaves TNA, he's, kind of doing his thing on indies and stuff like that and conventions. Pops up in WWE. He's one of the hottest heels in the business.
Well, the thing is, he could have popped the corn, too. But Dutch, during his tenure with TNA, was on the creative team, was one of the producers of the television program, helped lay out a lot of the matches, supervised the commentators. While I would be sitting in front of him, he'd be feeding the commentators information while I was telling the director, what was happening in the match to shoot. He was very instrumental. We were one of the first ones there and the last ones to leave at TV tapings. We rode together, but then Dutch went back to Nashville and spent time in the office, and et cetera, et cetera. And with television production, post-production. So I don't know that anybody ever came up with the idea to have him be a manager, because he was already such an important part of the process that it's like, yeah, he could pop the popcorn too, but how does he have time?
You have Paul Heyman and Dutch under contract in WWE. Neither are involved in any type of creative process whatsoever, except maybe perhaps their own programs. Do you think it would be in WWE's best interest to approach these guys and get them involved in creative, or do you think at this stage, at least in regards to Dutch, since you know him better, maybe it's better off that they don't deal with that stress these days?
Well, they've ridden that horse with Heyman, and I think, and once again, I think it's one of those relationships that drives both sides mentally insane. With Dutch, I think definitely yes. Obviously, he's got a lot to offer just because he could give some experience to whoever is on their writing team these days. Pretty much none of which are actually wrestling people, but they're all writers, because Dutch knows how to book wrestling, but that may not be what they're looking for. And it used to be like when every great once in a while the WWE writers would come down and visit OVW, maybe once a year the last couple of years that we were dealing with them. I would tell Danny Davis, I either need 3 minutes to say hello or 3 years to just have him follow me around, because anything else in between ain't going to do either one of us any good.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, when you're in OVW, I mean, they would always change up storylines on you, or not even do that. But I remember, I think back in the day, I think it was Damager, who later became Danny Basham.
I know where you're going with this. I'll lead the charge.
Yeah, he was in a blood feud with Doug Basham, and I guess you could tell the story better. But I'd
been pushing the team of the Damager and Doug Basham as one of the top athletic young heel teams in the business that had not been on national television. They were excellent in the ring. They were having wonderful matches. But they weren't guys that the WWE found originally. They were guys that OVW found, and the WWE put them under contract, but they would never use them. Pitch them as a great team, never use them. So finally, after about a year and a half of being a team, I pulled the trigger on breaking them up for all of my summer shows at Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom. They were going to be in main events against each other and tag team matches where they would have a WWE superstar as partner against the other one was some WWE talent. Big program, right? And they shaved Doug's head and made him a brother tag team the week after I actually did the angle in OVW without even telling me. I saw it on television. And then all summer long, I had to use the cover of the story that Doug Basham, through his woman, had secretly gotten to John Laurinaitis, who was involved in talent relations, and bribed him to try to force the Damager to quit wrestling by either making him wrestle as his brother due to his contract or walking out. And Damager wouldn't give him the damn satisfaction. But in OVW, where that wasn't in effect, they could beat the shit out of each other. And it worked. They drew money in the wrestling school all summer long with all these matches. And we had great crowds, and they had great matches, and then they took them to the WWF as a team and completely fucked them both up.
And what's funny too is you actually got John Laurinaitis on the air, right? You got him actually.
By the time we got finished with him, because every time that they would bring Nick Dinsmore, OVW original, who the fans loved, and he was the top babyface and the OVW champion, they bring him up and make him a retard named Eugene. So the OVW fans were so mad that they would love all these wrestlers who had all these great matches, and then they'd go up there and they'd either have some stupid gimmick or they wouldn't acknowledge who they were and make them do something foolish that was less than their presentation in OVW. So that I had to give the fans a scapegoat, so I blamed John Laurinaitis of talent relations. And by the time he came down and made an appearance on TV, he had more heat than any heel we'd ever had. And then I brought Jim Ross out to overrule him because JR is an icon, and the place, they threw babies in the air. It was hilarious.
That is awesome. They own the OVW tape library, right? At least like the older one with like John Cena and like those guys when you were booking?
Yes, we made that particular arrangement with them a number of years ago.
All right, well, hopefully they have it on the network. I'm sure.
I don't know, but even if they don't, I have VHS copies that I watch at my own house for enjoyment.
Hey, well, lucky Jim.
And a photocopy of the check that I got as a result of them owning the other ones.
Very nice. And I think you'll be glad to hear this. I don't know if you already know. Nick Dinsmore is now a trainer for NXT. So
well, yes, and finally they smartened up with Nick's a dedicated kid. He's a very talented kid, and he's also, for his age, a very experienced trainer because he was an assistant trainer with OVW from the early years of him being involved in wrestling, and he's had a lot of experience with it. So he's definitely an asset.
And another OVW original, I don't know if you've been following him lately online, Rob Conway. He won the NWA title. He's been a regular for New Japan Pro Wrestling. So he's another guy that I feel like that's had a career renaissance that they kind of just, brought on the roster, did nothing with for a while, kind of disappeared, and now it seems like he's back on track, albeit without WWE. But hey,
well, you can see that's a thing. In some cases, you can make it work for yourself. Not unfortunately a lot, but in some cases, you can make it work for yourself without having to subsist on the WWE dole, as they say.
Well, Jim, I really do appreciate the time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Once again, fans, if you didn't hear at the beginning, Jim Cornette is going to be pretty much everywhere. He might be coming to your town very soon. You get more information, jimcornette.com. Follow him on Twitter, @TheJimCornette. You can check him out on MLW.com for the Jim Cornette experience. Anything else, Jim?
I think that's about it, except if you do yard work, apply at my house by the end of April.
Sounds good. Jim, thank you so much for the time, sir. Pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.